Hey everyone, just wanted to record a little intro to this video, which is mainly the Sunday talk from the 2nd of November 2025. We talked about giving and we introduced a significant opportunity in the life of Vineyard 53. And I want to introduce it for two reasons, partly to say thank you. We don't underestimate the fact that you would take the time and effort to listen back to a Sunday talk in the week. So thank you for that. Also, to give you a little heads up that we had a problem with the recording partway through. And so you're going to have a bit of John, you're going to have a bit of me in the past, and then you're going to have a little bit of me here in my office just filling in the gaps before Anna carries on at the end and finishes the talk live again on the Sunday. So just so you know when that comes and it's not a surprise for you. But as I said, thank you so much for listening and for praying and considering this opportunity with us.
If it's your first time here today, well, I also want to say it's exciting, but you're probably wondering, what the odds, 52 Sundays in a year, and I come on the one they're going to talk about money and generosity, come on. But I want to say, again, real warm welcome if that's you, and there's never a compulsion to give, and we give out of our response to God's love. And on the plus side, if you can survive today and come back next week, then it can only get better from here. I don't mean that, but it's a funny thing to talk about, isn't it? Money and generosity. But I want to frame today with a couple of verses that have been on my mind a lot recently. And they speak about going deeper with Jesus. They speak about seizing a moment. They speak about how we can make the most of an opportunity that's in front of us as church and family. And it's from the book of Ezekiel in the Old Testament. If you've read that, it's an amazing, wild book in places, but it's this Old Testament prophet, so we're talking 2,500 years ago. And Ezekiel's prophesying about the people of God, what the future, the people of God is going to look like. And he builds up his whole teaching to this climax right at the end in Ezekiel 47. And it's pointing towards the renewal that Jesus would bring, the rescue he'd bring. It's even talking about the cross before it's happened, 2,000 years before, or 500 years before. And it speaks about how the Holy Spirit is going to be available to everyone, and it refers to it like a river, like life that's going to come. And water is this metaphor all the time for the Holy Spirit. Jesus talks about this as well. He says, let me pick up a couple of verses, "Whoever believes in me, rivers of living water will flow from within them." The famous verses in John 7. He also says, "Let everyone or anyone who's thirsty come to me." So it speaks about this purpose, what we're made for, how Jesus rescues us, how God's life can flow in us like a river. It is incredible. And flows out from us to bless others as well. So this is all in this Ezekiel vision, and what's happening at this point, right at the end of this prophecy, is that God's leading Ezekiel through a scene. He's got this mind's eye picture, and God's leading him through it. So that's your introduction. If you've got a Bible, it's in Ezekiel 47, and I'm reading from verse 1. "The man," so this guide that God's provided, "brought me back into the entrance of the temple. And I saw water coming out from under the threshold of the temple towards the east, for the temple faced east. The water was coming down from the south side of the temple, south of the altar. He then brought me out through the north gate and led me round to the outside, the outer gates facing east, and the water trickled from the south side. As the man, this guide, went eastward with a measuring line in his hand, he measured off 1,000 cubits and led me through the water that was ankle deep. He measured off another 1,000 cubits and led me through water that was knee deep. He measured off another 1,000 and led me through water that was up to the waist. He measured off another 1,000, but now it was a river that I could not cross, because the water had risen and was deep enough to swim in. A river that no one could cross. He asked me, 'Son of man, do you see this?' And he led me back to the bank of the river. When I arrived there, I saw a great number of trees on each side of the river. He said to me, 'The water flows towards the eastern region and goes down into the Arabah, and it enters the Dead Sea. Where it empties into the sea, the salty water becomes fresh. And swarms of living creatures will live wherever the river flows. And he goes on about a large number of fish and trees. And he says, where the river flows, everything will live. It's a beautiful passage. And it's a vision of what Jesus would do. Now, I grew up in rural Gloucestershire, if you're wondering where my accent comes from. It's rural Gloucestershire, and I've lost a little bit of the twang as life's gone on. But one of the things I used to do as a kid, and this isn't going to make me sound cool or trendy or anything like that, but I used to try and find the source of the River Thames. Okay, so I lived near this place called Kemble, and apparently the start of the River Thames is at that point. And so we used to go out on our bikes all the time. I'm not sure I ever found it. I mean, we found lots of water. There was loads of water everywhere. But apparently somewhere there's a little spring or there's a little puddle that starts the River Thames. And we were pretty excited about that as a kid. That tells you a bit about me. But anyway, the River Thames, what it does from that tiny starting point, it becomes the biggest, greatest river in England. It flows past palaces and Parliament, and it goes right out to sea, and it becomes miles wide. And it starts with this little spring, this little puddle in a place called Kemble. And it becomes this stream and then becomes a mighty river. Now, the church in our nation for decades has been in decline. Like huge decline. And I've been watching it through my lifetime and been praying for something different and been like, Lord, I'm sure there's more for us, but it's been like that. Apart from the last year or so, there's been some beautiful, encouraging, small signs. It's like the water table's beginning to rise. They've been talking about it like, calling it the quiet revival in the press. And I've just got a load of slides that will just flick up quickly. And I've shown these before, and we've looked at them before and talked about them, about the Bible being more significant now, and people not wanting to be atheists, and people having more dreams and more encounters with God than for a long time. And it's just beautiful. It's something new. There's like a new openness. And it might not seem that impressive, I don't know if it's affected your life or not. It might not seem like much, but I love that God often begins like this. And again in Ezekiel, that move from a trickle to something that brings life, a river of life. Just a couple of observations from me, and I'll pass over. But we see in this passage that it starts at the source. So the river begins at the temple. The place of God's presence, the place that God is, that's the start of the river. You might have caught all that stuff about the east and the south and the north and all these different directions in Ezekiel 47. Well, east, where it begins, and in ancient Hebrew, symbolizes new beginning. And it symbolizes the Holy Spirit as well. That's what the east does in their language. New beginning. And then the idea is that it spreads south and north and east and west, everywhere. It's like the great hymn, one of the hymns I used to sing growing up, and it was written in the Welsh Revival, actually just about an hour from here. I love the song. Here is love, vast as the ocean, loving kindness as the flood, when the Prince of Life our ransom shed for us his precious blood. The author of that actually lived in Chester for much of his life, but that idea of ocean and growing and his loving kindness shown at the cross. The source is Jesus, and he's always on the move. Like the river flows further, it flows deeper, and where the river goes, life flourishes. That's the idea. And the invitation of this passage in Ezekiel is to jump in, like is to go all in as a church, as individuals, filled with God's love, filled with his presence, in a river that's moving and flowing. And I love that picture. It was like ankle deep. And there was a choice, like to go knee deep. And there's another choice, like to go up to the waist, and then all the way through, that you would dive into the water. And all that God has for us is deep enough for our deep longings and our needs. And he wants us to jump in. And that's this season, the feeling that we have is about going in, like going in deeper. There's a warning about being stagnant in Ezekiel 47, about the Dead Sea, and it goes on and talks about swamps and marshes later in the chapter. And it's a kind of this warning that life can get too busy or preoccupied or comfortable, or we can let sin in and just kind of settle and just stay ankle deep, or even outside and watching on. But the river's moving. It's a place of life and growth. And so it's saying, keep focused on Jesus, start at the source and walk with the river, participate in what God is doing. You know, the focus of much of our prayers and our Sunday gatherings throughout the last year has been on getting ready and finding our place, finding our purpose, spotting that God's doing something new in our time. There's beautiful unity among the churches here. There's a potentially quiet revival of things that God is doing in our midst. His presence is close, but we need this water of life and to jump in. And that's the place where we bear fruit, the river bears fruit. And that's why we give. I mean, this involves every part of life. It involves us choosing to follow Jesus, thinking about how we live and how we work and how we speak, but also how we give. You know, generosity is not a strategy. We don't talk about it once a year to fundraise an initiative. It's about Jesus's work, like he's the source. We want to become more like him. And so today really is an opportunity to jump in. And when we do that in any aspect, as well as giving, when we start small, things can grow. God can shape something beyond our imagination. And so that's my invitation from Ezekiel 47 is, how would we jump in? And I feel like it's a significant moment for us as a church. Tim.
Wonderful. Oh, that's loud. That's hot. And that's how I wanted to start as well, so that's good. Just want to let you know then about a significant opportunity that's come up for us as a church. From the very beginning, we've been a church on an adventure. We've sought to make the most of every opportunity to invite people into relationship with Jesus and to seek transformation in every part of life. And we really believe that God has a unique purpose for us as Vineyard 53, a purpose that will have a lasting impact in this region. And over the past few years, we've seen significant growth in the ways that we love and serve the region. Through Move In, Move On, Street Angels and other initiatives, we've begun to meet real needs in our community, continued to meet real needs in our community. And we've discovered more needs along the way. And at the same time, we've seen an increasing number of people calling Vineyard 53 home. You saw tens of them leave earlier. And we've met more and more people exploring faith as the quiet revival increases in volume. And I'm not making this up, but each week at the moment, since September, there have been people in the room who have encountered Jesus in their bedrooms or at home who've then come to church for the first time. And that's really exciting. And this is what we've longed to see from the outset. And we believe that it's just the start of what God's doing. When we look at the decade ahead of us, we want to position ourselves to demonstrate God's love to our region by meeting more and more practical needs. We want to be known as a place where many people have met Jesus and found their lives transformed by him. We want to be a place where people in a generation marked by anxiety and fear are growing up free and powerfully alive in Jesus. So about 6 weeks ago, we visited the Loves Building on Garden Lane in Chester. Now, half of the ground floor is vacant, the other half is rented by a charity called Kids Bank. We've got a really good relationship with them, working in a similar area to Move In, Move On. The space offers us a blank canvas. That's euphemism for it needs some work. But it's a space that we could shape as a space for welcome and hospitality in the middle of Chester, a resource for the vulnerable, and a space for us to invest in our young people. We are still negotiating the lease, and more on that in a minute, but we've sensed God's fingerprints in the process so far. We've had a couple of prophetic words, one from a person who didn't know the detail of us visiting this place and said, I think that God's calling us to reorder our Loves, Loves Garage, Loves. And it was a few weeks before, kind of put two and two together there, and there's been other prophetic words as well. We've also had a remarkable favour with the landlords. We believe 12 different businesses have viewed the property, and as soon as we put our interest in, that they want to rent it to us. They want to rent it to us. They want a charity or a church to use the space and not a business. So there's favour, there's a sense of God speaking, and then there's also the more practical sense that this makes sense as a next step for us as a church. It allows us to continue to step into the vision that God has been inviting us into from the beginning. And so we envision this space becoming a space of welcome. We talked a bit this year, John mentioned it before, about the quiet revival that's stirring in our nation, people exploring faith, coming to church in increasing numbers. And we want to be positioned to welcome those exploring faith really well. And so we're going to fit the space with a good kitchen and a cafe space where we can express extravagant hospitality, where we can host alpha courses and welcome lonely and vulnerable people into a drop-in cafe. We also want this space to become a resource for the vulnerable. Move In, Move On is almost 5 years old, and we've seen a remarkable need in that time. It's hard to celebrate this in many ways. We've now supported 422 people, we've given out 219 packs of household items, and we've partnered with 39 agencies. Hard to celebrate it because that represents families fleeing domestic abuse or seeking asylum in this country. But there are limits at the moment to what we can achieve because of the space that we have. We need increased storage space for Move In, Move On. And crucially, we need a relational space where we can invite people to connect in a community at a really difficult stage in their lives. We also want this space to be an investment in our youth. This space will provide opportunities for our young people to volunteer, to love and serve the region. There'll also be space for them to invite their friends for Alpha. We want to run youth Alpha courses and space for the new youth band to practice. And then one of the things we hear back from our young people a lot is that they love when the church is a force for good in the world, that's something they can be proud of. And so we want to make sure that this resource for the city is something that the youth are involved in from the start and that they can own and be proud of to their friends. And then fourthly, we want this space to be a space that is a gift for the region. That's been part of our vision from the start, and that's why we love Street Angels. They'll operate out of this space, but we also want to give ourselves away more and more to the region. And so we want this space to be a place that statutory workers and agencies can use, and actually they long to use. They kind of fight for bookings in the space because it's such a great location and a lovely place to be. That's what we envision using the space for, and we're still on a journey with this. And this is the point where I talk about details. And so some of you are like, oh great, now Tim, give us the details. Some of you will be like, in that case, just, let the words wash over you. In a few minutes, I'll tell you that we're out of the details. Firstly, this isn't a done deal. I'm going to be really honest with you about that. There are two things that we need in order for this to work out. We need the finances to make the space fit for purpose, but we also need to negotiate a suitable lease. We're quite a long way on with this, as we said, a lot of favour with the landlord. But we need a lease that's going to be long enough to make the upfront cost of investing in this space worth it. Maths to follow in a moment. But it's not worth us spending money on a space that we'll only have use of for a year or two. So we're asking for a longer lease that doesn't give the landlord the option to kick us out after a couple of years. Why a rented space would be a very good question for you to ask right now. And the answer is that it still represents good value. Cue the maths. Little formula's going to appear on the screen behind me. Who's excited? I'm excited. Okay, the way we're kind of evaluating good value is this, that the annual cost is basically a total of the annual rent plus the refurb cost over the number of years we'll be in the space. And if you add those two things together, the rent is cheap in this place because it is a blank canvas. And the refurb cost, significant, we'll come to that in a minute. But the annual cost still represents really good value for a space in that location of that size that we will be able to do exactly what we want to in it. We'd have to spend a lot more to find a space that would already be ready for all the things we'd want to do in it. So that's why a rented space, it's good value. The maths can go now. You might also ask, why not invest money in a Sunday venue? We know that Binks isn't our forever home as a church. The chairs are uncomfortable. You know that, you're sitting down. I'm standing up. No. We have to bring all of our stuff on a Sunday in and out of a van. But we have got substantial room to grow on Sundays while we're here at Binks. It might be a bit busier this morning, but most Sundays we are less than half the capacity of this room, even factoring in the fact that many of the chairs don't quite work. And so our next steps with this Sunday venue are to develop our welcome. It's to invite others in. It's sitting near the front in the middle to make space for others. It's continuing to make the most of this location near the centre of the city and in the heart of the university. And alongside this, it's running bustling Alpha courses, offering hospitality to the lonely and the isolated. It's serving our region and inviting them to come and join us on a Sunday. We will move out of the space in the future. It is not forever. But the next step in the space is to step into our purpose of seeking transformation for the region and inviting people into relationship with Jesus. And as we do so, we believe we're going to see more people coming on a Sunday. And then when we come to move from the space in the future, the reason won't be our discomfort about the chairs or annoyance about unloading and loading the van, but it'll be because we need more room to continue on the adventure that God is inviting us on. You would also be right to ask about what will happen to our office space on Sealand Road. Our lease on that space ends in March 2027. In the short term, it's not our intention that we will use the new Love space as midweek offices. Loves would fulfil most of the functions that our current office space does, including allowing for an increase in our activities for most of those things, but not all of them. There are some things it won't do. And so by March 2027, we will need to have somewhere else to use as offices. There are a few options on the table that we'll pursue in due course. And these options are available, at least in part, because the rent on Loves is significantly cheaper than the rent that we're paying on our current office space, leaving a bit of room in our budgets to find a new, smaller office space that will meet those few needs that we'll have there. So we're still on a journey with this, and we sense that God is inviting us to take a step here and go for this space, trusting that he will make a way either for us to move into this space or into a very similar space soon. And as we journey into this, we'd love you to get involved. And firstly, we'd love you to give financially. Anna's going to speak more about giving in general in a moment, but for us to be able to step into this, we're going to need to give sacrificially together for the sake of our region. So please prayerfully consider what God might be inviting you to give to this project. As we've said, it's not a done deal, and as such we want to move forward in faith and handle your gifts transparently and responsibly. So there are two ways you can make a financial gift. You can give now, and if you do that, all gifts will be ring-fenced specifically for the project and not used on anything else. In the unlikely event that the opportunity fell through, you would have the option to have your money back or to keep it ring-fenced for another similar opportunity. And if that came about, we wouldn't use your money without having got your express permission first. That's the first option, give now. The second option is to pledge now. You may want to make a commitment now and give when the opportunity is confirmed. Any tenancy won't start until late January or early February next year, so you can pledge now and give later. We're looking to raise a total of £140,000, which I know is a lot of money, but let me break down what that represents. Firstly, building costs. We have budgeted £90,000 for building costs. That includes a contingency. We've been generous here, partly because we want to prioritise quality, but also because if you've ever watched Grand Designs or a similar programme, you'll know that costs normally increase and we want to make sure that we've got enough. We also want to staff the project as well, so with a project management cost of around about £5,000, so that we're not putting more pressure on our team who already do such a great job. We want £20,000 to cover the first year's rent while we're tenants in two different places. And finally, we actually want to raise £25,000 for us to be able to resource our activity when we move in. We don't need all of this money to move forward, but we want to approach a project like this with our very best. Not just making it fit for purpose, but making it somewhere that expresses radical welcome to those who have never experienced a welcome before. Making it somewhere that we'd be chuffed to invite our friends to experience Alpha. Somewhere that statutory workers long to use for events and meetings. Somewhere that our young people are proud to tell their friends about. And we don't just want to make it an effective, functional space. We want to have the funds to use the space well from the word go, staffing, to resource and develop the work that we're already doing, and to launch new projects as opportunities present themselves. There's no expectation to give, there's only an invitation. We'd never want you to come to church and feel like you've been given a hard sell. The invitation is simply to give cheerfully as you sense that God is inviting you. And in this, our core principle is equal sacrifice and not equal gift. Some of us can give a lot, and some of us can give very little, and that is okay. The invitation as a family is to share the sacrifice of loving and serving our city and our region together. Please, though, don't underestimate the impact that small gifts given regularly can make. For example, if you were to give £10 a month to this project, the same amount as kind of giving up Netflix for a couple of years, or have a few less coffees a month, whatever it is that you like to do. After 1 year, that's £120, 2 years, £240, 3 years, £360, and with gift aid, the total would be £450. And that would be enough for us to buy a table in our cafe space and the chairs around it, to make space for people to come and explore faith at Alpha, or to find community when fleeing domestic abuse. Small gifts make a big difference. That's the first way to get involved, it's to give. And the second is to pray. Prayer is always our priority. So please join us in praying for God to provide what's needed for what he's inviting us into, that God would increase our capacity and effectiveness and loving and serving our region. Pray that God would draw more and more people to himself, and for us to be ready to help those people to meet Jesus and to shape their lives around him. And pray for our young people to find hope and purpose in Jesus that shapes their whole lives. Come along to the early morning prayer meetings on Wednesdays at 7 a.m. Come to Encounter each month to worship and pray, and there'll be other opportunities to pray together and alone too, and we'll invite you into those in due course. Thirdly and finally, we've got give, got pray. Thirdly, ask. How's God inviting you to get involved? Do you have gifts and skills that he might want you to use to help bring this opportunity about? Maybe you've got questions too. Please ask us the questions. We want to do this together, and are confident we'll only succeed in stepping forward into what God is inviting us into if we do it together well with God. We have some booklets as well. Sadly, they weren't available on Sunday, but we're going to make a real effort this week to get them out to you. So this is I'm speaking on the 3rd of November, and we're going to get those out to you. They'll also be available at Sundays here on out. There's also extensive information and FAQs on the website, vineyard53.org/purpose. And I'm going to hand over to Anna now. And we missed the very first few words that Anna said too. So just to let you know that she is just explaining why it is that it can be awkward to talk about money. Over to Anna.
One of the main reasons there's conflict in relationships is often to do with money. It has all sorts of emotions attached to it, and so it is hard to talk about. But it's a really important topic to God, because he talks about it all the time. And the reason he does that through Jesus is because we need freedom in this area. Like, we all need some freedom in this area. I certainly do. And that's my prayer today, that you know, after everything you've heard today, John, Tim, myself, chatting to others, that you'll just feel a bit lighter, a bit liberated about this thing of money and how it holds us. Because there are going to be all kinds of financial circumstances in our church. We're very, very aware of that. And, you know, there'll be people here, and we just want to acknowledge, we know that sometimes it's difficult just to get by week on week. We get that. And it can feel incredibly insensitive from here to be talking about money. And we want you to know that we feel that. But at the same time, there are people here who are living incredibly sort of generous lives, like inspiringly sacrificial lives. We want to thank you. It's often because of what you give, that we're able to do what we can do as a church. Massive thank you to you. So we are aware that people will be in very, very different places with this topic. But we'd be remiss not to talk about it. Because on nearly every page of the Gospels, you know, Jesus speaks about money or about stewarding resources. He is not afraid to talk about it. And I love that word that Sergio gave earlier about fear. Sometimes we can feel really afraid of topics like this, and we mustn't. We must be liberated today and kind of give this back to Jesus. I love the words that we often hear, Jesus' most famous words on this topic. Do not store up for yourself treasures on earth where moth and vermin destroy, where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourself treasures in heaven where moth and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And you know, I often think, you know, why would Jesus, the greatest teacher of all time, make money one of his primary topics? You know, was he in constant fundraising mode? Was that his gig? You know, no, it wasn't. I mean, he was homeless. They had no building. His disciples didn't have any salary. I mean, to pay his taxes, I just remember that story. I don't know if you do. It was like pulling money out of a fish's mouth. Like, that's amazing. That's an incredible story. You should have a look at that. So it wasn't like that. And it wasn't even because his culture was overwhelmed, by consumerism as we are today and materialism. It wasn't about that either. People were generally quite poor, living day to day. But he taught on it regularly because he knew that money has this unique power over us. Like, it really does. And it has this unique power to reveal the sort of real condition of our hearts, like what we really, really care about. And it is clear, and it's said in the Bible, that it is the number one rival to God for the human heart. And so that's why we have to talk about it. Not because we're trying to scoop up loads of cash, but because we're trying to get free. And we're trying to make God, number one. And he cares about us. He cares about us wanting to trust him for our future. He cares about growing faith in us. He cares about freeing us from fear. And so that's why we're doing this today. I nearly missed a page. Do you know what? It's okay. I think I might. John and I actually, we started giving, I think probably kind of formally, about 25 years ago. So this is like a regular, ongoing kind of, I guess some people would call it tithing. It feels it's an Old Testament concept, but it's a useful one. I've been very grateful, I think, to have that just as a sort of principle, because in the Old Testament there was this process of tithes and offerings. Tithes were the first sort of 10% of everything that sort of God gave people, and they would give that back, and then there were free will offerings from time to time as well. And I think giving can be really complicated, can't it? I think it was for us, and so that sort of helped us a little bit, because I think that, if you're anything like me, you'd be thinking, so how do I do this? And I remember asking lots of questions like, is it before or after tax? Is it, is it the calendar year, financial year? Is it about income? What is a tithe really? How should I do this? I think sometimes what I was really asking was, what is the minimum I can give and still be a generous giver? I really do. I think that's what I was kind of thinking. But you know what? I think having come through that process and used that as a little bit of a basis, it's been quite freeing, actually. But I think the best advice for all of us today is just start somewhere. Generosity is like a muscle. We have to start using it, we have to train it, and then we grow in it, and it's wonderful, and then we can use it much more freely, and that's brilliant. But we do need to sort of just start somewhere. So just like, as Tim said, just giving something, even a little something, using that muscle, we'd be surprised by the impact that it can have. And we actually, we are so grateful to all of you who regularly give. We absolutely want to just say thank you, thank you, thank you. But you know what? Even this week, we've had chats with people who've been like, I've been meaning to fill in that form for ages, and we just haven't got round to it. And we just say, today's the day, do that if you can. We've got extra giving forms around, but just that little thing of just stepping out, just starting. And of course, we've got two things going on here today, haven't we? We've got this exceptional opportunity, and we really do believe the fingerprints of God are all over this opportunity. And so thinking about giving to that, but also just coming into line with that opportunity to get free in terms of giving regularly to something that doesn't benefit yourself, something that is just going to build the kingdom of God. So giving to the church, and it's an amazing and freeing experience when we start doing that regularly. Okay, where am I? Giving is an adventure. It is a joy. It actually is. And something John and I kind of chat about, lots of research that's often sort of done. He's so geeky. I love him. I really do. But he's so geeky. He loves coming up with stats and stuff. And then he'll be at the dinner table and he'll say, do you know what Harvard Business School have put out today? And I'll be like, what, darling? What is that? Anyway, but we had this chat quite recently about the happiness studies that they've been doing at Harvard Business School, and it's been amazing just to see what they have said. And they, interestingly, I think after loads and loads and loads of processing, what they've been saying is that that money can't buy you happiness. except if you have extra money that you give away, and then it does. There you are. You don't need to read the tomes, you don't need to read the research. I've told you now. We are happier when we give. And that's a biblical concept as well. You know, it's right there in the scripture. You know, we're blessed when we're a blessing. And it is just, it's a wonderful, wonderful process. So it's a joy. And, you know, giving is one of the examples, just, you know, there aren't many, but one of the examples where God invites us to sort of test him in this. So as we give, you know, he does in so many ways give back to us, which is wonderful. As a church, we will never, ever ask visitors and guests to give. I hope you recognise that. You know, when the basket comes round, like talks like this, we never expect that. But we just encourage anyone who feels that this is their home, this is their family, to pray and to think about what we could cheerfully give. You know, and I think we just have known over these years, you know, we've been doing this for a long time now, but we've known that exciting things are possible when we step up to the plate and we say, okay, I'm gonna give something and I'm gonna see what God does with it, because he's a God of multiplication. And I really want to say that. I felt like that was the word that I prayed about this morning. I just felt that's the word that landed. You know, as we give our little, he multiplies it. You know, a tiny piece of bread in the hand of God will feed thousands. And I think we just need to remember that as we're processing that through this week. We have a spiritual need to give generously. We do. And it's more important than the finance we need as a church. You know, that is the core. That's the heart of why we're saying this today. You, Vineyard 53, are a wonderfully generous church. And we are incredibly grateful to you who are financially committed to what God's doing among us. And we are absolutely thrilled to share this journey with you. We are going on an adventure, guys. You know, it's good. And I think, the Lord is going to show us some amazing and miraculous things as we partner together.